Jenna Locke wasn't afraid of the woods. She'd camped in Alaskan glaciers, recorded sonic booms in desert valleys, even crawled into an active volcano's caldera for 30 seconds of molten audio, all in the name of capturing the world's rawest sounds. But Wicker's Hollow felt different, not haunted, not cursed, just quiet. And that intrigued her more than any ghost story ever could. 5 minutes in and I'm already bored, Carl muttered, as he dragged the equipment case behind her. Where's the eerie part? Where's the, I don't know, howling wind and sinister trees? Jenna paused and turned toward him. It's not about what you hear, it's about what you don't. This forest has zero ambient sound. Zero. That doesn't exist anywhere else in nature. Carl looked around, unimpressed. So what? It's just quiet. No, it's silent. She tapped her recorder, the high-end one with omnidirectional capture. Silence is never natural. There's always micro-noise, water trickling under, soil, distant insects, leaf friction in the wind. Even your own heartbeat breathing. Something, but the hollow, nothing. It's like the world turns off. They'd parked the Jeep at the old ranger station on the edge of the forest, the last human footprint before nature swallowed everything. Locals refused to go further. Even the trail markers were long gone, consumed by ivy and time. 20 years ago, a family of 4, the Mercers, had gone hiking in Wicker's Hollow and never returned. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Their camp was found intact, sleeping bags still zipped, food untouched. Only their boots were missing, as if they'd simply walked away barefoot and vanished. It became a local myth, the kind that evolves into a dare among teenagers and a warning whispered by elders. Some blamed sinkholes, others serial killers, but most believed something else, something listening Weiss lived in those woods. Jenna didn't believe in any of it. Not ghosts, not monsters, not curses. But she did believe in phenomena, and a forest that devoured sound. That was worth investigating. By noon they were a mile deep. The further they went, the denser the trees grew. Gnarled limbs twisted overhead, forming a skeletal canopy. Sunlight filtered through like diluted ink, gray and sluggish. The forest floor was a patchwork of rotting leaves, moss, and black earth. There were no birds, no squirrels, not even bugs. Just the steady crunch of their boots. Until that, too, disappeared. Jenna stopped abruptly. She looked down and stomped once. Nothing. No thump, no crackle. She waved a hand toward Carl, who blinked, mouthing something. She pointed to her ears. Carl frowned, shook his head, mouth still. Moving? Soundless. A pressure began to build inside her skull. Not pain, just weight, like her brain was submerged in molasses. She lifted the mic and aimed it around, listening through her headphones. The world was flatlined. No distortion, no hiss, no static. Absolute zero. She tapped the microphone casing. Not even that came through. Her heart should have been racing, but it wasn't. Everything inside her felt slow, as if her own body was being muffled. She pulled the headphones off and looked to Carl again. Gone. She spun a full circle. Just trees, gnarled, gray, and unyielding. Carl! She tried to shout, but her voice never made it out. Her lips moved, her chest expanded. But there was no sound, not even in her own head. And then, from somewhere in the silence, a knock. Soft, deliberate, like knuckles against wood. It echoed with impossible clarity, despite the absence of air. Jenna's mouth dried instantly. She backed up, eyes scanning the forest for any movement. There was none. But the knock came again, louder, closer, knock, knock. She took off running, her boots pounded the earth, or they should have. No matter how hard she ran, she couldn't hear herself. No panting breath, no branches snapping, just the dull throb of adrenaline in her temples. She didn't stop until her legs gave out. She collapsed beside an ancient moss-covered tree, chest heaving, ears straining. The silence still clung to her like wet cloth. And then, a third knock. This time from behind the tree. She scrambled upright, fear pulsing now in pure instinct. Something was there. Not moving fast, but moving with purpose. It didn't rush, it didn't chase, it was following. Jenna fumbled with the recorder, flicking it off and on. Still no audio. Still that impossible void. A branch cracked behind her. She turned. Nothing, but something was wrong. The forest was shifting. The trees, they weren't where they had been. The trail was gone. No familiar markers, no path. Just an endless mesh of bark and shadow. Wicker's Hollow didn't just contain silence. It was built from it. Something ancient. Something aware. She backed away, but the forest wouldn't let her go in a straight line. Each step seemed to take her deeper, not out. Even the light grew dimmer. Not from the time of day, but as if the sun itself was being muffled. And then far behind her, so faint she might have imagined it, Jenna. Spoken like a thought, not a sound. It came from inside her mind, but it wasn't her voice. It was colder, hungrier. She ran again, this time not looking back. Only forward, toward any thinning in the trees, any hope of open sky. Her watch said, it had only been 2 hours. It felt like a lifetime. The forest didn't breathe. That was the first thing Jenna noticed as she stumbled deeper into Wicker's Hollow. No wind stirred the branches, no shift in temperature or air pressure. Everything was static. The silence was no longer just absence. It was presence. It clung to her, wormed into her ears, her thoughts. The deeper she walked, the more the silence started to feel like a thing alive. She tried retracing her steps, marking tree trunks with her pocket knife, but within minutes, the marks were gone. Either the trees were healing, or she was never walking in a straight line at all. Her recorder hung useless around her neck, screen glowing but empty. No waveforms, no response. She'd flipped it off 10 times, then on again, hoping it would jolt back to life. Still nothing. Even the mic, a top-tier directional condenser, picked up nothing. The world was a vacuum. Carl was still gone. She wanted to scream, but her body resisted. Her throat tightened. Her muscles hesitated. Deep down, some primal instinct told her, don't make a sound. Whatever was here could hear it, even if she couldn't. Instead, she whispered his name. No sound came, but her lips moved. Carl, where the hell are you? The knocking had stopped. That somehow made it worse. The only direction she could go was forward, even if forward no longer meant anything. Eventually, the terrain began to change. The forest floor sloped downward into a shallow basin. The trees grew taller here. More veneered, their roots twisting above ground like ribs from some giant buried beast. Moss crept over every surface, and in the center, rising like a petrified monument, stood an ancient tree, massive, dead, and hollowed through the middle like a cathedral of bark. Its interior was a deep, yawning black. Jenna approached slowly, boots silent against the wet earth. Something about the tree felt familiar, though she'd never seen it before. A strange sensation pulled at her gut, like déjà vu made of gravity, as if she had dreamed of this place long ago, or maybe forgotten it. She stepped closer. There were footprints in the mud, not recent but visible. 4 distinct paths, small and barefoot, circling the tree, and then disappearing inside it. She crouched and touched the prints. Real. Human. Then, she noticed something else. A pair of boots half buried beneath the tree's overgrown roots. Worn, weathered. The laces were undone, as if someone had taken them off in a hurry. She knew those boots. They matched the missing Mercers, the family, who vanished 2 decades ago. Jenna's chest tightened. She reached for her camera to document the find, but her fingers trembled. She froze halfway, because something was moving inside the tree. Not fast, not threatening, just shifting, like someone pacing just beyond the hollow's curve. She should have backed away. Instead, she stepped closer, drawn by a mix of terror and curiosity. She peered inside. Nothing. Just darkness. Endless, unmoving. But her eyes didn't feel like they were looking into a tree. It felt like they were staring into a hallway, an endless corridor carved from wood and silence. And then finally, sound. A whisper, barely audible, not in her ears but in her head. "You brought it back." Jenna staggered away from the tree. "No," she mouthed. "I didn't bring anything." But the voice ignored her. "It doesn't like to be recorded." She clutched her recorder instinctively and watched in horror as the screen finally flickered. Waveforms. Tiny at first, then spiking. Then it played back. Not her voice. Not Carl's. Just breathing. Shallow. Erratic. Not human. Wet. "You're not listening," the recorder hissed, then died again. Jenna turned and ran. The forest seemed to stretch around her, fighting her steps. Roots caught her ankles. Branches leaned low, tangling in her hair. The air thickened. And then, finally, a sound she recognized, her own name. This time not in her head. It echoed faintly from somewhere distant. "Jenna!" She skidded to a halt. It was Carl. She turned toward the voice and bolted, crashing through brush and bramble. Each step brought back fragments of sound. The crunch of leaves, the snap of twigs. The world was leaking noise again. She burst into a small clearing and nearly collided with Carl. He looked pale, sweaty, dirt streaked across his face. "I've been yelling for you for half an hour," he said. "Where the hell did you go?" Abo grabbed him by the shoulders. "You disappeared, Carl. I turned around and you were gone. The trail, the sounds, everything vanished." He stared at her. "I didn't go anywhere. You walked off." They stood in silence for a long moment. The real kind. Natural, full of subtle life. Birds, wind, leaves, heartbeats. The hollow had let them go. "Come on," Carl said, slinging the gear case over his shoulder. "We're done here, whatever's in there. We don't need to prove it exists." Jenna nodded but didn't move. She looked back once more. The forest loomed, still quiet, still waiting. The ancient tree was gone. In its place, just more tangled wood, as if it had never been there. But her recorder was still warm in her hand, and on its screen, frozen in static waveform, was one final phrase burned into the metadata. "This is only the beginning." Back in the safety of their rented cabin on the outskirts of Arborlee, Jenna stared at the recorder. She'd powered it off, removed the batteries, even put it inside a metal case. Still, every hour or so, the screen flickered on for a few seconds, always with the same waveform, always with the same message embedded in the metadata. "This is only the beginning." Carl sat across from her, arms crossed, legs shaking. "I've been trying not to say it," he began, "but we should destroy that thing, smash it, burn it, whatever it takes." Jenna didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on the device. "It's a recorder, Carl. Metal and plastic. It shouldn't be able to do anything on its own. She was trying to convince herself more than him. There's no power source, no signal, yet it's talking to me. He leaned in. You said it wasn't just sound. You felt it. Like pressure. Like it was in your head. She nodded slowly. It's not transmitting, it's receiving. Carl blinked. You think it's some kind of antenna? No, she said, her voice low. I think it's infected. A heavy silence fell over the room. They had barely escaped the forest, but neither felt safe. Jenna could still sense the weight of the hollow pressing around her like invisible vines creeping under her skin. She hadn't turned on the TV, didn't want to. The quiet felt louder now, and the recorder pulsed with it. Carl stood up and began pacing. We need to get rid of it, bury it, toss it in the lake, that tree, that thing. It's inside that device now. Jenna didn't argue, but she didn't move either. Instead, she opened her laptop and connected the recorder via cable. Maybe it would give her something. A clue, a pattern. Anything to explain how a patch of forest could erase sound and return it laced with messages. The device didn't mount. The system didn't even recognize it as hardware. But the screen turned on again, this time with a timestamp. 3:15 m. June 11th. Let it in. That's tomorrow, Carl muttered. Jenna's stomach twisted. No, that's tonight. The message blinked once. Then the screen went dark again. That night, Jenna set an alarm for 3:10 a.m. She didn't expect to sleep, but somehow she drifted off. And when she jolted awake, the clock read 3:16. She'd missed it. Her breath caught in her throat. The cabin was still, heavy. The kind of stillness that screamed familiarity. The air wasn't cold, but she shivered. Her ears were ringing with that pressure again. She sat up. The recorder was glowing faintly on the desk across the room. She moved toward it, slow and unsure. Each step felt like walking deeper into the hollow again. The screen was backlit, white text crawling across. Are you listening now? A low hum filled the room. Sub-bass, not heard but felt. It vibrated through the floorboards, the glass panes. Her ribs, the hum resolved into a whisper. It lives in the pause, the space between breaths, between beats. It waits for the quiet, then a click, like a lock disengaging. Her closet door creaked open, not loudly, but unmistakably. Jenna froze. Nothing moved, but the silence returned deeper than before. Carl's breathing in the next room and gone. Her own heartbeat muffled. Even her blinking felt slowed, as if sound itself had thickened. And then, knock, knock, knock. Inside the closet, she didn't go to it. She ran. By morning, Carl was already packing. I don't care if we lose the grant or the footage or your entire career. We're leaving. Jenna didn't disagree. But as she watched him load bags into the Jeep, she noticed something strange. The woods, visible from the cabin's rear window, were closer. She swore there had been a fence, a dirt road, 100 yards of meadow. Now the trees pressed almost. Against the walls, the hollow was spreading. Jenna reached for her recorder once more. She knew she should leave it, knew it had something inside it now. But her instincts as a scientist and something deeper, more irrational, overruled caution. She pressed play. This time, there was no whisper, no breath, just a voice. Her own. Day 3. Subject is expanding. Confirmed manifestation outside origin zone. This is no longer an environmental anomaly. This is a migration. Carl entered the room mid-playback. What's that? Jenna shook her head, horrified. That's me, but I never recorded that. The message continued. It doesn't want to be found, but it wants to spread. It needs silence, places where it can erase noise. It eats the loud things first. The cities come last. The audio ended. A new message flashed across the recorder. You brought the hollow with you. They drove fast. Carl barely spoke, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, as the Jeep tore down the mountain road. Jenna clutched the recorder, in her lap like it might explode. Outside, the trees whipped past, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching, or worse, following. They didn't talk about the voice, about how it had been hers, about the warning that the hollow was migrating. The forest wasn't just a place anymore. It was a condition, and Jenna was carrying it. They reached the first sign of civilization, a gas station, empty but lit, just as dawn broke. The sky was stained pink, and for a fleeting moment everything felt normal again. Carl got out to fuel up. Jenna stayed in the car, watching the static on the recorder's screen cycle through broken text. Noise draws it. Quiet feeds it. You're a door now. She tried turning it off again. It refused. Inside the gas station, Carl was arguing with the clerk, an older woman with tired eyes and a radio headset clamped to one ear. Jenna stepped inside just in time to hear him say, "We just need directions to the interstate. Our GPS is useless out here." The woman looked up and immediately focused on Jenna. Her eyes narrowed. "You came from Wicker's Hollow, didn't you?" Jenna froze. Carl turned to her. "How the hell does she know that?" The woman removed the headset and set it gently on the counter. "Because I haven't heard a bird chirp in 3 days. Not a coyote, not even a cricket. And I live out here." Jenna stepped forward. "Do you know what it is?" The woman stared, hard at the recorder in Jenna's hands. "No, but I've seen what it does." She leaned in. "Sound disappears first, then people, then memory, until only the hollow remains. Every year it reaches a little farther out." Carl scoffed, but Jenna didn't. "It's following me," she said quietly. "Or I'm carrying it." "You're leaking it," the woman replied. "It clings to thoughts, emotions, equipment. It likes recordings, tape, film. Anything that listens too long." Jenna felt nausea curl in her gut. "What do I do?" The woman didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to the back of the station. "There's a storage room. Lead-lined walls, old Cold War relic. If you want to slow it down, you lock that thing in there. Don't open it. Don't ever listen to it again." Carl nodded. Finally, a sane plan. Jenna hesitated. She looked at the device, the way it seemed to throb with something just beneath the screen, like it was alive or aware. Reluctantly, she followed the woman through the back hallway. They entered a reinforced storage unit built like a bunker. Thick metal door, heavy lock. No windows. She placed the recorder on the concrete floor. Just as she turned to leave, the screen blinked. "You heard me once. You'll hear me again." Jenna slammed the door shut. That night they checked into a motel 30 miles away. A boxy place with green carpets and buzzing lights. Jenna didn't sleep, not because she wasn't tired, but because the world was too normal again. That was worse. The silence was gone. Cars passed outside. A dog barked in the distance. The heater hummed. All comforting, all natural, except she could still feel it. The pressure, that unnatural stillness, hiding between sounds, like a second layer, behind the noise, just waiting for a crack to open. At 2:12 a.m., the television turned itself on. No image. Just white screen. But the static hiss had been removed. Total silence. Jenna crept forward, staring at it. Suddenly, words appeared on the screen, typed in slowly, like something learning language through her own brain. "You locked the door." "But I'm already inside." The power cut, not her voice, not Carl's, just breathing. Shallow, erratic, not human, wet. "You're not listening," the recorder hissed, then died again. Jenna turned and ran. The forest seemed to stretch around her, fighting her steps. Roots caught her ankles. Branches leaned low, tangling in her hair. The air thickened. The next morning they drove back to the gas station. The station was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, just gone. The building had been flattened like it was erased. No scorch marks, no debris. Even the foundation was missing, as if it had never existed. Where the bunker had been, only a wide patch of gray, ash-like dirt remained, completely silent. Carl turned to Jenna. "We left it here. You saw me lock the door." She nodded, eyes distant. "I think it let us lock it. It wanted to copy itself first." "Copy what?" She didn't answer, because deep down she knew it had copied her voice, her thoughts, her pattern of listening. It didn't need the recorder anymore. It had used it as a transmitter, a seed. Now it was in her, and through her it would spread. The hollow wasn't chasing them. It was growing inside them. The sound returned slowly. Not all at once, not a comforting rush like breath into lungs. It came in patches, as if reality were rebuilding itself, out of order. A breeze, a creaking floorboard, a fly buzzing past her ear. Jenna noticed it the next night, inside a rundown roadside motel 2 towns over. The clerk hadn't asked for ID, didn't seem to care they paid in cash. Just nodded, handed over a key and said, "Room 11. Avoid the end rooms. They're quiet." The hallway smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. Carl collapsed onto the bed, half dressed, half asleep, but Jenna stood in the bathroom, staring into the mirror. She wasn't brushing her teeth. She wasn't even blinking. She was just listening. Something had changed. It wasn't just that the recorder was gone. It wasn't just that the gas station had vanished like chalk in rain. It was the way she could feel sound now. Like her body was a tuning fork, a dish, a receiver. She tapped her ear. She heard the tap. But a second later she heard it again. A faint echo. Same rhythm, same pitch. Coming not from her ear but from inside the wall. Tap. Eerie. Tap. She pressed her face against the cracked tile. Heart slowing. "Carl," she whispered. "It's in the walls." He didn't believe her at first, even when they turned off everything in the room. Lights, heater, TV. The motel still hummed. It wasn't electricity, it wasn't pipes. It was listening. They both sat on the floor, backs to the door, staring at the walls, and the walls stared back. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the room fell silent again. Everything. Even the street. Outside. Not a single tire screech, dog bark, or hum of distant trucks. Just a dense, wet quiet. And then a voice, not spoken, not played, but felt, like pressure against the eardrums. Echoes aren't reflections. They're remainders. Carl stood up suddenly, clutching his head. "It's in me, Jenna. I can hear it." She scrambled to help him as he dropped to his knees. His skin had gone pale, lips shaking. "Say something," she begged. "Say anything." He looked up, odd, and opened his mouth. Nothing came out, but from the ceiling behind the vents came his voice. "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here." Again and again, a recording, a loop. Like the walls were playing, back the fragments of his mind. She yanked him to his feet and dragged him out into the night. The door slammed behind them without wind. They slept in the car, engine off, windows down. That night, Jenna dreamed of the tree again. It wasn't rooted in soil anymore. It stood in a hallway made of flesh, walls pulsing like lungs, floor soft and warm. The branches scraped the ceiling, and from them hung dozens of recorders, all blinking, all whispering. She walked forward in the dream, and each device she passed played a voice she recognized. Her mother, her old professor, Carl, her own voice, laughing, weeping, screaming. Not memories, but leftovers. Things left behind in moments of silence. When she reached the tree, it breathed. You opened your ears, so now we speak through you. She woke up screaming, and for the first time, Carl didn't wake up. He was breathing, but shallow eyes open, fixed, staring at the windshield. She shook him. Carl, hey, come on, say something. His lips moved, but another voice answered. From the glove box, he's busy now. Jenna stumbled out of the car. The world outside was frozen, no wind, no birds. The trees, distant still, felt closer again. She realized something horrible. It wasn't the hollow moving toward the world. It was the world collapsing toward the hollow. Folding, converging. Everything, eventually, returned to silence. She didn't take Carl to a hospital. What could she say? He's been infected by silence. Instead, she drove aimlessly for hours until the sun rose, until she saw a sign. Welcome to Wither's Rest, population 132. A tiny town, quiet, unassuming, perfect. For something that wanted to nest, to grow. But Jenna had an idea, a dangerous one. She needed noise. At the local library, dusty, quiet, mostly forgotten, she begged the teenage clerk to let her into the basement archives. Anything, she said. Old sound systems, PA equipment, film reels, vinyl players, anything analog. He stared at her like she was insane. She didn't care. Eventually, he let her in. Beneath the floorboards, among dusty microfiche and VHS tapes, she found what she was looking for, an old military-grade, white noise generator. She flipped it on. The box whined to life, filling the space with aggressive static. It was hideous, unrelenting, but the pressure in her head lifted. Carl blinked, his mouth opened. Jenna? He rasped. Where are we? She smiled, tears in her eyes. We're still here. That's what matters. But as she embraced him, her phone vibrated. A single notification from a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "Noise can hold it, but not forever." Jenna stared at her phone in disbelief. Without her touching it, an audio file had begun to play on its own. But there was no sound, only an unsettling silence, heavy and thick, as if the silence itself was speaking directly to her mind. The phone unlocked itself, the media player opened, and the file played not through speakers, but somehow inside her head. It was a transmission she couldn't hear but could feel, a pulse rippling through her thoughts like a virus. Carl clutched his head, trembling violently as pain seared through his skull. "We need help," he gasped. "Scientists, sound engineers, the CDC, someone." Jenna shook her head, her eyes dark with fear. "No one will understand. Not until it's too late. This isn't just a signal. It's a carrier. It spreads through sound, but it isn't sound. It's inside people now." Outside, the small town of Wither's Rest lay unnervingly still. The sun shone on quiet streets and tidy houses, but the silence was unnatural. Jenna noticed a man sweeping his porch wearing headphones, but there was no music, no sound of any kind leaking from them. A little girl walked her dog, but the dog didn't bark or wag its tail. It simply followed silently, a shadow without spirit. The old radio tower at the town's edge blinked steadily, transmitting something unseen, something old brought back to life. Then, at precisely 10:43 a.m., every phone in town began ringing, all at once. Mobiles, landlines, even the rusty rotary, phones in the municipal building. But when answered, there was only a faint humming noise. No voice. Then a knock. Tap, tap, tap. 3 sharp knocks like someone tapping urgently on a door. Jenna watched from the library parking lot as the townsfolk emerged from their homes, expressionless, carrying their phones as if they were compelled by an invisible force. There was no panic, no confusion, only a trance-like calm as they walked purposefully toward the woods on the outskirts of town. She realized with growing dread, they were being summoned. Carl grabbed her arm. "We have to." "Stop them," he urged. "No," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the terror clutching her chest. "We have to stop the signal." Together they raced toward the radio tower. It was a rusted relic, long forgotten, but now adorned with new, strange wires that pulsed with life. These cables were unlike anything Jenna had ever seen. From a distance, they looked like ordinary wires, but up close, they seemed to breathe, throbbing and pulsing like veins in a living creature. The wires snaked down into the earth, disappearing into the soil like roots feeding some monstrous tree beneath the town. Inside the shack at the base of the tower, the old analog broadcast panel was connected to a strange digital device. It was a recorder. Jenna recognized it. Or at least something very similar. Its casing was warped and burned as if by fire, but its screen flickered with an eerie glow. On the display danced an undulating waveform, moving on its own, alive and deliberate. Beneath the waveform, a chilling message glowed. "Say it loud enough and it becomes true." And below that, Jenna yanked the power cables free, severing the device's connection. The generator sputtered and died, but the recorder's light stubbornly remained on. Outside the shack, the townsfolk stood at the edge of the tree line, silent, unmoving, waiting. Carl pulled a hatchet from the jeep. His hands trembled with fury and fear. Without warning, he raised it and smashed the recorder to pieces. A scream erupted, not from the broken device, but from the very air around them. A horrible, echoing wail that seemed to claw at their souls. Then, everything went still. For a moment, the town froze. Then the people began to move. Some collapsed, clutching their heads. Others staggered aimlessly, their eyes vacant. Carl lowered the hatchet, breathing heavily. "Did we stop it?" Jenna shook her head, her skin crawling with dread. She pulled out her phone and held it near the cracked wall of the shack. Not her voice, not Carl's, just breathing, shallow, erratic, not human, wet. "You're not listening." The recorder hissed, then died again. Jenna turned and ran. The forest seemed to stretch around her, fighting her steps. Roots caught her ankles, branches leaned low, tangling in her hair. The air thickened. "Speak, and shape your fate." Her throat tightened. The room seemed to close in, shadows dancing on the walls. Breathing with the pulse of the hollow, she swallowed hard. "If I speak, what if I make it worse?" Carl shook his head. "If you don't, it already is worse. It's inside you, waiting." Jenna closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I won't be your voice." The static around her surged like a wave crashing against a rock. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the room, flickering the lights. The words on her phone changed. "Then listen." Outside, the town was no longer quiet. Soft murmurs, voices, overlapping and blending into a dreadful chorus, filled the air. People staggered through the streets, eyes glazed, lips moving silently as if they heard commands from somewhere deep beneath the ground. Jenna felt it too, an ancient hunger stirring, clawing beneath the surface of Wither's Rest. She grabbed Carl's hand. "We need to find the source, whatever's feeding this thing underground." Together they set out toward the forest's edge, the murmurs growing louder, forming words only their hearts could understand. Let us in, let us feed. The Hollow was awake, and it was hungry. Jenna and Carl stepped cautiously into the shadowed forest that bordered Wither's Rest, the trees looming tall and skeletal against the gray sky. The wind was eerily still, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting. The air hung heavy with damp earth and decayed leaves, but beneath that familiar scent lay something darker, something unwholesome. Jenna's boots sank slightly into the soft ground, which seemed almost too pliant beneath her weight. She glanced down and froze. The dirt pulsed faintly, like a slow, terrible heartbeat, and beneath the surface dark veins of bluish light pulsed and writhed like snakes twisting through the earth. Roots, yes, but unlike any she'd ever seen, thick and writhing almost. Alive. This isn't natural, she murmured, feeling a chill creep up her spine. The Hollow. It's more than just a signal. It's something alive, something buried deep beneath us. Carl's eyes scanned the trees, wary. What exactly? Is it, though? Some kind of ancient creature, a parasite? Before Jenna could answer, the ground shuddered beneath their feet, a low, guttural rumble vibrating through the roots and rocks alike. It was as if the earth itself was growling, alive with anger and hunger. The hairs on Jenna's arms prickled, and a cold sweat broke out across her forehead. Did you feel that? Carl asked, voice tight. She nodded. It's awake. Suddenly the soil burst open in a twisted explosion of roots and dirt. Jagged tendrils rose from the ground, coiling and twisting like serpents. From the tangled mass emerged grotesque shapes, faces warped with silent screams, hands clawing desperately toward the sky, fingers gnarled and reaching. The roots writhed with unnatural life, as if they were trying to escape the earth's grasp. Jenna stumbled back, heart pounding wildly in her chest. It's feeding off the town, off us. Carl pulled out a flare from his jacket pocket and struck it, the brilliant red flame casting flickering shadows across the monstrous root forms. Then maybe fire will stop it. The blaze caught quickly, licking the bark of the nearest trees, and creeping toward the writhing roots. The Hollow let out a silent scream, a soundless howl that vibrated through Jenna's bones like an earthquake. But instead of retreating, the roots pulsed brighter, their sickly blue veins glowing fiercely. Almost hungry, the fire didn't burn them. It only seemed to feed the thing, fueling its grotesque movements. Jenna's breath hitched as she realized the terrifying truth. The Hollow thrived on destruction. It fed on fear, chaos, and pain. The fire was a feast. We can't fight this with fire, she said grimly. It's only making it stronger. Carl lowered the flare, his face a mask of desperation. Then what do we do? Jenna swallowed hard, eyes flicking around the dark forest. We starve it. Starve it, Carl repeated, confusion thick in his voice. The Hollow feeds on noise, on sound, on voices, on the panic it creates. If we stop feeding it, if we silence ourselves, maybe it will weaken. Carl's gaze dropped to the strange roots creeping closer beneath their feet. So, silence? Jenna nodded. Complete silence. No voices, no noise, nothing for it to latch onto. The woods seemed to respond to her words. The rustling leaves hushed, the birds fell silent, and even the distant river's babble seemed to fade into the heavy stillness. The silence settled over them like a shroud, deep and absolute. Jenna took a deep breath, trying to steady her pounding heart. We have to warn the town. Everyone. They have to stop talking, stop making noise. Carl looked skeptical but nodded. Good luck convincing a whole town to be silent. Before they could move, a sudden movement flickered at the edge of Jenna's vision. From behind a tree stepped a figure, a woman, eyes wide and glassy, her mouth moving soundlessly. She stared at them, her lips forming words Jenna couldn't hear. Jenna froze. The woman's eyes glazed over, blank yet desperate. "We can't let it take them," Jenna whispered. The woman suddenly let out a guttural sound, an unnatural, discordant noise that shattered the fragile silence. The roots reacted instantly, thrashing violently, bursting toward the woman like ravenous beasts. Carl grabbed Jenna's arm, pulling her away as the roots surged like vipers. The woman collapsed to the ground, writhing silently as the forest trembled. "We don't have much time," Jenna said, breathless. "The hollow is spreading, every sound, every cry is fuel." As they hurried back toward the town, Jenna's mind raced. How do you convince a whole town to silence themselves when fear makes people scream? When panic turns the streets into chaos? The silence she craved was unnatural, oppressive, but it was their only hope. Jenna pulled out her phone, fingers trembling. The last message from the signal still glowed on the screen. "Speak and shape your fate." She stared at it, knowing that every word she uttered risked feeding the hollow further. Her own voice was already a beacon, a gateway for the darkness that thrived on noise. The town lay ahead, a quiet shadow beneath the gray sky. And beneath the town, the roots pulsed and writhed, hungry for sound, for life, for chaos. The hollow waited, and Jenna knew this was just the beginning. Jenna and Carl reached the edge of Wither's Rest, just as the sun began to sink behind the dense horizon. The last light flickering weakly through thick clouds. The town felt different now, like a shell of itself, drained of warmth and color. The streets were oddly empty, except for faint shadows slipping between houses and behind trees. No children's laughter, no distant barking of dogs, no hum of cars. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that roars. As they moved through the deserted streets, Jenna's heart pounded louder than any sound around her. Every step felt like an intrusion, every breath a gamble. The message on her phone glowed faintly in her hand. "Speak and shape your fate." But she had learned that speaking meant feeding the hollow. She had learned that silence might be their only weapon. Yet the town was far from silent. They turned a corner and stopped dead. In the middle of the road stood a man. No, not just a man, but something else. His eyes were empty black pits, his skin pale and stretched tight like parchment. He tilted his head unnaturally, as if listening to sounds no one else could hear. Jenna's breath caught. The figure stepped forward, moving with jerky, unnatural motions. Carl whispered, "It's one of them." Jenna nodded grimly. People controlled by the hollow. Around them, more figures appeared. Faces vacant, lips moving in silent chants. They moved toward the town square, their voices barely audible but rising in a chilling crescendo of whispers and moans. The ground beneath Jenna's feet vibrated, a subtle but steady tremor, like the heartbeat of something massive, pulsing. "Beneath the earth. We need to stop whatever's underground," Jenna said. Carl looked at her, eyes wide. "But how? You said silence, but these people? They're spreading it." Jenna's fingers tightened around her phone. "We have to break the signal, stop the source." They hurried toward the old radio tower again, the rusted metal silhouette looming, like a giant skeleton against the darkening sky. But something was wrong. The cables snaked out from the tower and into the town, like veins spreading poison. Suddenly, the ground cracked open near their feet, and a thick black root burst forth. Coiling around Carl's leg, he shouted, struggling to break free. Jenna knelt and grabbed the root, pulling with all her strength. The root resisted, tightening like a constrictor, cold and unyielding. Then a voice echoed, her voice distorted, overlapping with hundreds of others, rising like a terrifying chorus inside her head. Speak, speak, shape your fate. The hollow was calling her again, demanding she surrender her silence. Carl twisted free, breath ragged. It's using you. Using your voice. Jenna shook her head. No, I'm going to use it against it. She looked around desperately, searching for something to destroy the root. Her eyes landed on the flare still glowing in her hand. She raised it toward the root, and with trembling fingers pressed the flare against the thick black wood. The root hissed and smoked but didn't burn away. The hollow was stronger than fire. Panic rose in Jenna's chest, but she forced herself to breathe. If fire couldn't stop it, maybe something else could. She closed her eyes and remembered the silence. No noise, no sound, no movement. She raised her hands, and with slow determination, motioned for Carl to do the same. Around them, the infected people halted, sensing the change. Jenna took a deep breath and focused on the silence. Not just the absence of sound, but the presence of calm. The peace that comes when everything stops moving. The air thickened. The pulsing roots slowed. The dark veins in the earth dimmed. The voices in Jenna's mind grew quieter. She opened her eyes and spoke, not with words, but with a whisper of intention, commanding the hollow to retreat. Suddenly, the roots shriveled and cracked, retreating into the earth. The infected townsfolk blinked, their vacant stares clearing as if awakening from a nightmare. Jenna's phone buzzed one last time, displaying a final message. She looked at Carl, exhausted but alive. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time she felt hope. Wither's Rest was quiet again, but not forever. The town of Wither's Rest lay beneath a heavy sky, its streets quiet as dusk settled like a soft shroud. Jenna stood at the edge of the forest, the place where it had all begun. The ground beneath her feet still faintly pulsing with the dark energy of the hollow. But tonight, the unnatural hum that had gripped the town for weeks was gone. The silence felt different now, not oppressive but fragile, like the calm after a storm barely survived. Carl was beside her, exhaustion etched deep into his face, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. "Think it's really over?" he asked quietly. Jenna shook her head, looking out at the trees. "I don't know. The hollow isn't something you just kill. It's part of the silence between sounds. It feeds on the space where voices disappear. We only starved it." They had done everything they could. After severing the broadcast signal at the old radio tower and confronting the dark roots beneath the forest, the hollow's grip on the town loosened. The people who had been trapped in its trance slowly came back, blinking as if waking from a deep nightmare. The whispers ceased. The creeping roots receded underground, returning the earth to its normal, lifeless state. But Jenna knew the danger was far from gone. As they made their way back into town, the streets seemed washed clean. But still there was a hollow feeling, an echo left behind. They arrived at the library, Jenna's sanctuary and now the center of her battle with the hollow. The walls were scarred, windows cracked from past storms, but the books remained intact, silent witnesses to the horror the town had faced. Jenna sat at a worn wooden table, pulling out her phone one last time. She stared at the blank screen, the absence of the signal both a relief and a warning. The silence was no longer just the lack of noise. It was a presence, a force, waiting patiently. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. Jenna's heart skipped. The Baldi screen lit up with a message that made her blood run cold. The silence never truly ends. Jenna dropped the phone, the sound of it hitting the wood sharp in the quiet room. Carl looked at her, alarm in his eyes. "What is it?" Jenna swallowed. "Pardon, it's not gone, it's just waiting." She stood pacing as a terrible realization settled over her. The hollow wasn't just a creature or a signal. It was a force of nature, born from the void between sounds, the spaces where voices fade and no one listens. For weeks, they had fought a war against silence itself. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a voice, a soft murmur almost too quiet to hear. Jenna closed her eyes, straining to listen. It was a voice she knew, distorted but familiar, her own, and it was calling her back. She knew then that the hollow was not done with her. It had marked her as its vessel, the one who had given it voice. Wherever Jenna went, the silence would follow, waiting for the moment she spoke again. But Jenna refused to let it win. Gathering her courage, she took a deep breath and stepped outside into the night. The wind swirled around her, carrying the echoes of the town's voices, the laughter, the cries, the whispered secrets, all the sounds that made life real. The hollow wanted to erase them all, to drown the world in endless silence. But Jenna lifted her voice, not in fear or surrender, but in defiance, a clear, steady note, a song of resistance that cut through the quiet like a blade. The wind stilled, the shadows recoiled, and the hollow faltered. In that moment, Jenna understood something vital. Silence could not be fought with silence. It had to be met with sound, with hope, with life, with voices raised together. She would keep speaking, for Wither's rest, for the silence, for the space between. Because sometimes the loudest battle is fought in the quietest moments. And sometimes, the last echo is the one that saves us all.